This needs to be handled today. That man staying here, he doesn't belong in this neighborhood. That's my cousin. He's just visiting. So-called cousin or not, he isn't a registered resident. And people have started noticing. He hasn't caused any trouble. He isn't leaving soon enough. This moves forward. Fines, violations, whatever it takes. Fine. HOA President Susan Fletcher was caught on tape handing out a formal violation notice on Red Maple Drive, Harris County, threatening daily fines and a lien against homeowner Daniel Harper, simply for letting a visiting relative stay at his own house. She insisted the guest was unauthorized and warned that things could escalate all the way to foreclosure if the matter wasn't fixed right away. Neighbors later admitted this wasn't the first time selective enforcement had been used to pressure people in the community. What she didn't realize was that this single incident would set off a chain of events exposing abuse of power inside the HOA and ultimately cost her everything. Before we continue, tell us what city or country you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where our viewers tune in from. And if you think some HOAs go too far, hit like, subscribe, and join us here on Karen Unhinged at roughly 9:12 a.m. On a calm Saturday morning, Daniel Harper, a 34-year-old logistics coordinator and homeowner at 214 Red Maple Drive, was out mowing his front lawn. Glancing through a pile of unopened mail he'd left on the driveway. Property records confirm Harper had owned the home for just over 3 years, with HOA dues paid on time and no past violations on record. That ordinary morning was interrupted when a dark SUV rolled up to the curb. HOA President Susan Fletcher got out, clipboard in hand, and walked straight onto his property without any notice beforehand. Footage neighbors later reviewed showed Fletcher surveying the yard before she said a word. Her interest had reportedly been sparked days earlier, when Harper's cousin, Marcus Reed, showed up for an extended stay. Reed, a 29-year-old traveling contractor from Atlanta, was staying there temporarily between work projects. Nearby residents said Reed barely interacted with the neighborhood at all, just the occasional morning walk and a short driveway chat with Harper now and then. Fletcher's first questions came dressed up as casual observation. But her tone shifted fast as she started citing HOA occupancy rules, pointing specifically to clauses about unregistered residents and temporary stays that ran too long, though she had no actual paperwork with her at the time. Harper explained, simply, that Reed was a visiting family member, not someone living there permanently. Witnesses say Fletcher seemed to accept that, but added that she'd be keeping an eye on things. In the days that followed, more activity started showing up. Fletcher began driving past the house repeatedly, slowing near the driveway each time. Not long after, a formal notice arrived citing a possible violation under Section 4.3 of the Red Maple Estates HOA rules regarding unauthorized occupancy. The notice carried a warning. Failing to resolve it could mean fines piling up at $150 a day, the loss of community privileges, and even legal action down the line. At that point, there had been no hearing, and no proof had been offered that the guest had caused any disturbance or broken any rule at all. Still, this was no longer something casual, and it was only the start. Just days after that first notice, HOA President Susan Fletcher showed up again, in person. This time, there was nothing polite about it. She confronted Daniel Harper outside his own home and demanded to know why his so-called cousin was still around. Neighbors who later discussed the encounter said Fletcher claimed long-term guests weren't normal for the community and hinted that people like that could make others feel unsafe. She also brought up property values, even though not a single resident had filed an actual complaint. Daniel Harper stayed composed. He told her again that Marcus Reed was family visiting on vacation and had every right to be there. He reminded her there'd been no damage, no noise complaints, and no rule broken. Fletcher didn't push the argument further. She just scribbled something on her clipboard and walked off. What came next made things far more serious. At the following HOA meeting, held at the Red Maple Estates Community Hall on Birch Lane, Fletcher brought up a new issue during open session, non-residents using shared amenities, and argued the HOA needed to crack down harder to protect the community. She never said Daniel Harper or Marcus Reed by name, but several people in attendance later admitted everyone knew exactly who she meant. Meeting records show no official vote was held to change any policy that night. And yet, within 48 hours, the existing rules were suddenly being enforced differently. Marcus Reed tried to use the community gym a few days later. He was turned away. Staff told him guests weren't permitted during certain hours anymore. When Daniel Harper went with him the next day to sort it out, they were stopped again. Told that only registered residents could use the amenities until further notice. Other residents later admitted they'd had guests staying with them during that exact same stretch of time, with no issue at all. No notices showed up in their mailboxes, and no restrictions were ever applied to them. That alone raised real questions about selective enforcement. Not long after, a second notice landed in Daniel Harper's mailbox. It repeated the same claim of unauthorized occupancy, only this time with a fresh warning attached. Continued violation could mean losing all community privileges and facing even steeper daily fines. There was no hearing date listed, no clear deadline for compliance either. By now, this had gone well past a simple disagreement. It had turned targeted, the pressure mounting in a way that made it obvious this wasn't going to fade on its own. The moment that changed everything happened on an otherwise quiet afternoon, inside Daniel Harper's home on Red Maple Drive. At roughly 2:40 p.m., Marcus Reed was in the bathroom when a loud crash rang out. Neighbors later said they heard a sharp scream, then sudden movement inside the house. Within seconds, Daniel Harper ran toward the noise and found Reed down on the floor, bleeding, unable to stand after slipping. Emergency services were called right away. Dispatch logs later confirmed the call was classified as a fall injury with possible internal damage. A paramedic unit reached the property within minutes. Paramedic Emily Carter came in with her partner and started a basic assessment. The first checks showed visible bleeding and signs of trauma, though Reed was still conscious. Treatment began immediately, right there. Bandages went on, and the crew started prepping to move him safely for further testing at the hospital. In that moment, everything was under control. Then HOA President Susan Fletcher showed up. Witnesses later said she walked straight onto the property without a second's hesitation and immediately ordered the paramedics to stop. She pointed at Marcus Reed and announced that he wasn't a registered resident of the community and so had no right to any community services. Paramedic Emily Carter answered plainly. She told Fletcher that emergency medical care had nothing to do with HOA rules and that the patient needed care right now. Fletcher wouldn't accept that. She repeated her demand and warned that things would escalate further if her authority kept being ignored. Her whole focus stayed on rules she believed had been broken, not on the injured man on the floor in front of her. The paramedics kept working anyway. And right there, it became obvious. This was never really about HOA rules or guest policies or community standards. It was about control. In that moment, Susan Fletcher made it clear that holding on to her authority mattered more to her than someone's actual safety. That was the truth the neighborhood could no longer look away from. At the time, the paramedics were getting ready to move Marcus Reed into the ambulance. Things looked stable. His bleeding had slowed, and he was steady enough to be transported. The focus had turned to getting him to the hospital for a proper exam. That calm didn't last. According to the official police report, Susan Fletcher suddenly lunged forward, grabbed a heavy landscaping stone from the edge of the driveway, and struck paramedic Emily Carter without any warning. The first blow caused immediate injury. She tried again before Daniel Harper grabbed her and pulled her back. In an instant, the scene went from medical emergency to active assault. Dispatch logs confirmed a second call came in, this one asking for police, urgently. Officers reached the property within minutes. Fletcher was still shouting, still insisting she'd warned the paramedics to stay out of it, that they had no right to act in her community under her authority. That statement ended up in the official case file. Paramedic Emily Carter was treated on-site for her injuries before being taken away separately. Marcus Reed was also brought to the hospital, where doctors later confirmed his injuries, though serious, were not life-threatening at all. Susan Fletcher was arrested right there at the scene. The charges included assault on a medical professional, interference with emergency services, and unlawful entry. Under Texas law, attacking emergency personnel carries harsh penalties, possible jail time, and a criminal record that follows you for good. In the weeks after, the Red Maple Estates HOA board called an emergency session. Meeting minutes confirmed Fletcher was removed from her role as president, pending the outcome of legal proceedings. More concerns came up about her broader pattern of enforcement, which triggered a wider review of how the HOA had been operating. Several residents stepped forward. Reports of selective enforcement, intimidation, and misuse of power were submitted for review. What had started as one isolated complaint had cracked the door open on a much bigger investigation into how authority had been wielded inside the community. Susan Fletcher didn't just lose her title. She lost her grip on the very system she'd once used against other people. And for the residents of Red Maple Drive, it left behind a bigger question. How many other cases like this had slipped by unnoticed before this one finally came to light? If any of this feels familiar, or if you've seen something similar happen where you live, drop your thoughts below, and follow Karen Unhinged for more real stories like this one.